Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of 3. Today, my guest will be talking about how copper is the missing link to your health, physically and mentally. And I know that you really need that strong physical foundation to work on your mental health and your spiritual growth, whether it's overcoming anxiety and depression, losing weight, or detoxing your body the proper way, and even increasing that level of frequency in life. You need that strong physical foundation of health in order to gain the willpower to make the bigger changes in your life. If you're new to following me, I specialize in helping you get there. You can find my health articles, my cutting-edge natural supplements, devices, and protocols at sarabantahealth.com. My company is the sponsor of the show, so as you support my website, I'm able to bring you more cutting edge content and guests to this show. Like I mentioned, today we will be diving into the importance of copper for your health. But first, I wanted to talk about some tools you can use to enhance your health results you achieve, make it easier for you to reverse hormonal decline, improve energy, and reverse aging. The goal is to improve mitochondrial health, increase energy at the cellular level. And that goal also is to reverse insulin resistance, reduce toxicity, improve mitochondrial health, and all of these things are tied to aging, right? So number one, brand new accelerated scalar copper for copper supplementation. As we're going to talk about the importance of it, but why is the accelerated scalar copper different than any other? Most copper supplements only have about 5% absorption, whereas accelerated copper has 99% absorption. It's made with a proprietary scalar copper technology, and it is the only nanoscalar copper solution treated with water implosion technology and enhanced with those scalar frequencies to enhance the absorption and increase the benefits that you're getting from the copper supplement. Water can memorize good frequencies and those rogue frequencies. So the water implosion technology is stripping the water of those rogue frequencies, and we do the same with the silver and the accelerated gold. It's made only with ozonated and UV sterilized distilled water and the ultrafine pure scalar copper. Next is the accelerated keto, and this flips you into fat burning mode within 30 minutes, and your body taps into its own fat stores for energy right away. You feel great day one, and it gives you that mental and physical energy where you're like, I can do this now. It increases your ATP production when you combine it with intermittent fasting and a low carb diet. And of course, you're focusing on those wild animal proteins, not the ones full of amyloid proteins like chicken and conventional beef. But the other additional ingredients in accelerated keto helps break down the saturated fats into unsaturated fats, and they are easier for the body to utilize and easier for the body to convert into ketones. So when you're fasting, the body fat is more readily available to burn, and the energy is right there for you mentally and physically. The accelerated keto is able to help start defatting the liver. And you know I love my liver. I do recommend liver flushes 3 to 4 times a year, but the accelerated keto with the intermittent fasting, with the proper diet, is actually gently cleansing the liver on a daily basis. And the more a liver is defatted and unclogged, the easier it is for the liver to function and to convert the T4 into T3, which is your thyroid hormones. As your thyroid works better, your metabolism increases, your mitochondrial function is better, and you increase your energy. We also have the acceleridine, and this is a supplement. When we're talking about copper being the missing link, I do believe that iodine is the other missing link to our health. And iodine is needed in all tissues and cells. And with the acceleridine, it has 100% bioavailability, and it is toxic and radiation free. Most iodine supplements are radio contaminated, and actually have only 10 to 20% absorption. The accelerated iron is increasing your ATP production by 18 times, and that is true cellular energy. It is not just needed for your thyroid, it is needed for all 100 trillion cells in your body. It is the only monoatomic scalar charged iodine. So it has those scalar frequencies to detox the body of the graphene oxide, the spike proteins, and reverse the damage done to the DNA by the mRNA. No other iodine incorporates the healing scalar frequencies. Well, today we're talking about copper. And Morley Robbins is a retired hospital executive and a healthcare consultant who chose to be a wellness coach because we need it, right? All the information out there is not the truth. And he was out there to seek that truth. In the process, he has become a self-taught mineral expert. His highest purpose is to share this decade of daily scientific research on the profound metabolic interplay between three key minerals: magnesium, bioavailable copper, and iron. He is the author of Cure Your Fatigue, which I am loving at the moment. Welcome, Morley. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and have this conversation. Looking forward to it.
I am too. When I first heard you talking to Justin Stellman about copper and anemia, my ears perked up because my daughter has been anemic. Literally out of the womb, the doctor said she's anemic. Start her on iron supplements, and through the decades, she's now 18 years old. She has more energy now. But I joke that at the age of 4, I could not peel her off the couch. She just would not even go for a family bike ride around the block. And we've been on iron supplements. We've done everything the doctors told us. So now I'm sitting here listening, going, it may not have been the iron, it's the copper. So that truly, selfishly, is the reason I came out with the accelerated copper. And I'm having you on to really educate everybody about this misinformation.
Great. Glad to be here. And I think, go ahead.
Well, let's talk about where did this go wrong? Why are we connecting anemia and other health issues to a lack of iron, and no one's talking about the importance of copper?
Because they don't know about the research of Otto Warburg and Hans Krebs from 1927 in Dr. Warburg's Berlin lab, where they were studying this very issue, anemia. And they took a group of pigeons and a group of geese, and they bled them to the point of near death. Very significant loss of blood, which means a loss of iron. And then they wanted to see what is the physiological response to that trauma. And what shocked them is that there was a threefold increase in copper enzymes in the pigeons and a sixfold increase in copper enzyme activity in the geese. Now, people don't know that the copper is the general and iron is the foot soldier. And people need to go back to, the Battle of the Bulge and think about what that battle would have been if Patton hadn't been there. Very different outcome. And so copper is a critically important mineral. It is the Achilles heel of human physiology, and it never gets its due because it does too much. I mean, if we really started to tick off all of the different enzyme pathways that require copper, people would be running down the street like their hair was on fire. And all of this is not taught in practitioner training. Why? There's no money in copper. The other significant event was in the early 70s. There was a lot of concern about cholesterol. Everyone was preoccupied with cholesterol. And we were only held hostage to that for 65 years. But Leslie Clavet, a famed copper researcher, he's retired now, living in South Dakota, He wrote a very important article in 1973 and definitively proved that copper deficiency causes a rise in cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a spoiler alert. That just really blows up the whole model. And there's study after study after study that demonstrates what copper does, but it eviscerates the official narrative. The article that I found this morning, which I think is fascinating, I found 3 articles dealing with gestational diabetes, women having blood sugar issues as their pregnancy is progressing. And what was very clear in these 3 studies was that diabetes is not a disease. It's a metabolic strategy by the human to lower iron uptake because the tissue is drowning in iron. Again, a lot of people don't know that. And so the issue that is critical to this whole discussion is that there are about 32,000 symptoms described in the Merck manual. A lot of problems there that are outlined. But what people don't realize is that every one of them is caused by unchecked oxidative stress. And who's responsible for activating oxygen to allow energy to be released and at the same time deal with the oxidative stress that comes from the natural metabolic process? Well, it's copper. And so the Merck manual is silent on the metabolic foundation of all conditions that people deal with on this planet. And so it's a very central mechanism that is not well understood. And for whatever reason, I was drawn to it over a period of years and years of research that began with magnesium and then got me to iron and got me to oxygen. And then I went, oh my gosh, copper is the only element on the planet that can manage both iron and oxygen. Only element. And keeps them playing nicely with each other. And when copper is missing, we get oxidative stress and we get symptoms. And that's the underpinning of the conventional medical model.
Well, I've talked to anyone who's listened to my show or my coaching. I talk about the things that accelerate aging, and that's insulin resistance and oxidative stress. And you just touched on both of them and how copper is related to it. I think of just from learning about your studies and copper in general, that copper is kind of the key to open the door to let things happen, right? Would you agree?
Absolutely. And the research that no one knows about after 1927, so that was in Berlin. Let's fast forward a whole year to 1928, University of Wisconsin in Madison, and a very distinguished team of lipidologists were studying what happens if we deny rodents copper in their diet. What happens? They were just curious to see what the fallout would be. And there was a massive increase in iron accumulation in the liver. What is the liver? It's the Rife machine for our body. It's the scalar wave energy for our body. And we're not supposed to know that. And it's absolutely fascinating that that was in 1928. And then in 2021, a very high profile genetic team, we're studying 13 genes to see what happens if we deny copper and to see what happens. Is there any change in the genes? They were studying 13 genes, and there was only one gene that fired up. And it's called ferritin light chain. What people don't know is that there's actually 4 different types of ferritin. And we could have a long conversation about that alone. But the point is, the ferritin light chain is what loads iron in our liver and creates chaos in that critical organ and then disrupts sugar metabolism, fat metabolism, energy metabolism, and so on. And again, it's not common knowledge in clinical or consulting circles.
So Let's get into what are the signs of copper deficiency that people should look out for. I want to touch on that, and I also want to touch on the reaction between zinc and copper, because everyone says you need to be taking zinc if you're taking a copper supplement.
Right. The signs of copper deficiency are many and varied. Just pick up the Merck manual. Again, as soon as energy is not being produced, if you're not activating oxygen by bioavailable copper, if you're not turning oxygen into water, you're going to create oxidants. And those are accidents with oxygen. And the energy production is not the same when you don't have copper around. And my whole focus is ignore the enemies. Let's ignite the energy. That's really what copper's gift is to animals, mammals especially, and even plants, seafood, shellfish, things like that. But it's not well known. And so as soon as we have wonky energy production, we're going to get symptoms. It's absolutely axiomatic. And it's important for people to realize that this has been well chronicled since the 1920s, but it's just not taught in the modern era. And I've found a lot of articles that piece it together. And the important thing is for people to understand that our food system and our environment is very different today than it was 100 years ago. There's a speculation that for the last 80 years, there's been copper deficiency on the farm. Well, that's a very significant condemning statement, because if the farm soil, if the farm plants, if the farm animals don't have copper, well, then they can't make energy. And that energy can't be passed on to the folks who are eating those foods. And so it's a very subtle dynamic that's well laid out in the literature, but you got to know who are the right authors. You got to know the key years to do it. And that's all laid out in my book. I think people have a real roadmap of what to look for. And the people that say it can't be this easy, well, actually it is. And it's like they get tripped up. And the people who are drawn to the root cause protocol are high IQ. So, Sara, you've already passed the IQ test, but people with high IQ have two genetic defects. We're control freaks, and we love complexity. So when does stress begin for someone with high IQ? When they feel out of control. Know anybody who feels out of control in the last 2.5 years?
Everybody.
And what you don't know is that loss, that sensation of feeling out of control increases cortisol production. And cortisol stimulates metallothionein, and metallothionein binds up copper 1,000 times stronger than it binds up zinc. And so everyone loves to talk about zinc and how it's the critical mineral, but it's nowhere near as important as bioavailable copper. And it's more of a structural mineral than it is a catalytic mineral. And we could have a long conversation about that at some point.
So can you describe how they interact in the body? Why do people think that if you're taking copper, you have to be taking zinc?
Because Carl Pfeiffer in the 1960s wrote a very important book called Mental and Elemental Nutrients. And he's the guy that invented the copper-zinc ratio, or the zinc-copper ratio, depending on how you want to word it. And what a lot of people don't know is that Carl Pfeiffer was also a principal involved in a lot of other activity, shall we say, that we won't go into on the air. But let's just say he has a checkered past. And people don't know about Dr. Pfeiffer, and they don't know that MK Ultra was very instrumentally influenced by Dr. Pfeiffer. And people don't know that the people who are taking LSD need to have a lot of copper so they don't have a bad trip. That's very well laid out in the literature. And so there's layers and layers and layers of nuance that most people don't find on a one and done internet search. And so it's been a labor of love for me for the last, it's actually been 14 years now, to really piece together this fascinating expose of what happened, who done it. And it's, again, I can sing chapter and verse for those who are skeptics. I would just encourage people to be skeptical and not cynical. There's a difference between those two. And so the fact that you don't know about copper and bioavailable copper is very important. So let me give you an example. In the 1950s, they were worried about the incidence of schizophrenia. And what was it based on? Well, they'd started adding iron filings to the food system in 1941. And about 10 years later, people started fritzing out, significant emotional disorders. And so there's a very important study that was done in 1959 at Tulane University, working with some colleagues at Harvard. And they had 34 patients with schizophrenia. And they gave them one shot of the copper protein called ceruloplasmin. What happened when they got that shot? 30 of the 34 individuals were cured. So people don't know what oxidative stress does to destabilize neurotransmitters, hormones, all of the complicated chemicals in our body are reacting to oxygen status in our environment, but more importantly, in our body. And it's a little known dynamic that it's a very, it's not hidden per se. It's just, it doesn't pop up on a routine survey on Google. And so I'm a very persistent guy, have been my whole life. I love connecting dots. I'm really good at it. And what I've pieced together is we've been misled and we've been misfed. And the scale of it is 1,000 times bigger than people imagine. And it's like, well, we've had enough trauma over the last couple of years. Do we need to pull the rug all the way out? Well, I think in a way we do, because people need to know that this has been a century-long campaign to destabilize humanity. And
It's so interesting. Just over the last couple of years, you mentioned fear and the stress that everybody's under. So I want to talk about, and obviously we have to be careful with what we say, but as far as immune system, we are getting into the cold and flu season. Would you say that copper is a key element to strengthening your immune system?
Well, in 2020, let's just say that I was inspired to dig a little deeper. And what I found was I stopped counting at 52 articles that clearly identified that copper runs and regulates the immune system. I even found an article from 2008 that stopped a certain virus in its tracks. We won't talk about that. But the point is, the immune system, it only needs two things. It needs energy and it needs intelligence. And guess what? Copper provides both. And what people don't know is that before there was a nervous system in animals or in life forms, before that existed, copper was the nervous system. It is the source of communication. There's very significant evidence that the meridians are copper dependent. Well, that's pretty cool. And again, we're talking about influencing the movement of electrons, right? Because we're ultimately, in order to make energy, we've got to move electrons in the mitochondria. But what people don't realize is the speed with which it has to happen. So there's 5 complexes inside one part of the mitochondria. And again, when people hear about the mitochondria, their eyes glaze over a little bit because they remember their high school biology text, and they remember that there were 2 or 3 mitochondria on the picture. But they need to know that that picture was drawn by Walt Disney. It has nothing to do with reality. We have 40 quadrillion mitochondria in our body. That's a lot. And we have 100 trillion cells, but 40 quadrillion mitochondria, that's about 500 mitochondria per cell. And then we can break it down. Mitochondria in the liver, 2,000 mitochondria. Kidney, 4,000. Heart, 10,000. The mature egg inside a woman's body, you ready? You're sitting down, right? 600,000 mitochondria in a mature egg. And there are brain regions, especially the substantia nigra, 2 million mitochondria. But what people don't know is the work of Paul Cobine at Auburn University in Alabama, and very sophisticated copper researcher. He's on the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge. But in 2004 and 2006, he identified that there's 50,000 atoms of copper in each mitochondria. Okay, so 50,000 times 40 quadrillion, it's a really big number. Nobody even knows what's going on. And so we're left in this kind of this Orwellian world of like the Yellow Brick Road. And we're chasing monkeys and we're afraid of, this and that. And it's so clear what's going on, but you have to understand the research and understand the connections of copper and lack thereof to every condition that exists on the planet. So it's a fascinating dynamic that I was talking to a very high profile copper researcher today. Every few months I get a chance to really hobnob with the intelligentsia. Very nice guy. He actually returned my call, which was very special. And he's doing some really amazing research that I can't tell you. But the thing is, it's based on copper, and it's based on restoring copper status in our tissue. And the part where everyone gets confused is, as you were introducing it earlier, there's confusion about low iron in the blood versus high iron in the tissue. And they're not the same.
Well, hold that thought, Morley, because that's what I want to dive into after we take a short commercial break. This is fascinating. And I mean, honestly, we could go on for hours, but we will be right back with Morley Robbins. Welcome back to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I'm your host, Sara Banta, and I'm here with Morley Robbins talking about the benefits of copper. Morley, okay, here it is. I always laugh that you can actually adjust your blood test results for cholesterol by eating a ton of cholesterol the day before. And this shows that there's a difference between what's in your tissues versus what's in your blood. And you touched on that. What does it mean? And let's talk about the lie that we need iron supplements. And does anybody need an iron supplement? Or is this misinformation about the lack of iron or low iron in our body because of a blood test?
Yeah, great question. And of course, I have a very strong opinion. And there are a lot of people who follow my work, but not everyone agrees with me, and that's fine. I love having spirited debate, but I'm going to get into the research, which makes some people really uncomfortable. But the thing is, this confusion about iron status started in the 1920s by studying pregnant women. Wow. So when you get into the research and you understand the physiology of pregnancy, what you find out is that during the course of the pregnancy, there is a dramatic change in minerals that takes place first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. And the probably one of the most important studies was from 1995, and it highlighted the fact that there is a natural hemodilution during the course of the pregnancy. That hemoglobin levels in the mother go down. Why are they going down? Because she has to make milk for the baby. Guess where they're going up? They're going up in the baby. No one's thinking about that. And so the key is it's like we're at a carnival, and there's a barker, and he's got the nuts, and he's moving them around, and people don't realize that the concept of iron deficiency anemia is based on hemodilution that occurs naturally in the woman's body. And the key is getting people to realize that there's a specific reason for that. And the confusion is that iron in the blood is very different than iron in the tissue. And they're not the same. And so Bruce Ames, a world-renowned physiologist at UC Berkeley, at one point was the most quoted scientist on planet Earth. So he's not some rogue scientist, like has a goofy opinion. He's like one of the most respected scientists. And in 2004, he and his colleague, Dr. Kalilia, studied iron status in the blood versus iron status in the tissue. And what they discovered is that there's a 10-fold increase in iron status in the tissue that doesn't show up in the blood work. That's where the confusion is. And so people just think that the blood work is perfectly representative of iron status all over my body. No, it's not. It's representative of what's in your blood. And it's a very different world out there when we get into the tissue. And people are not aware. This study that was done was based on a couple 100,000 pregnant women. It wasn't 4 people. It was a lot of pregnant women who demonstrated that the hemodilution is very much alive. And what they discovered is that hemoglobin in a pregnant woman's body should be somewhere between 8.5 and 9.5. Not the mandated, it's got to be 12, or at the very least, it's got to be 10. If it's not 10, then we're going to have to take you to the hospital, and you can't have a home birth. And people don't know the games that are being played with the metrics. And so very important to know that there's more to the story. And that's really what we learned over the last couple of years. There's more to the story. We've learned to ask better questions. We've learned to be very insistent to get better answers, because we know we're not getting the full story. And so it's important for people to realize that low iron in the blood means low iron in the blood. And what really runs our body is an iron recycling system. Most people don't know about it. And so every second of every day, we have to replace 2.5 million red blood cells. So you and I have been talking for 35 minutes. times 60 times 2.5 million. It's a really important activity that the body engages in. And in the course of 24 hours, it's 200 billion red blood cells that need to be replaced. It's a really big deal. But here's the fascinating part of it. The amount of iron needed to support the replacement of 200 billion red blood cells, you think it would be like bazillions and bazillions, and it's 25 milligrams, 25. And what will further confound your listeners is to find out that 24 of those 25 milligrams of iron come from a recycling system that's run by copper. 1 milligram a day is supposed to come from our diet. It's not my idea. It's Robert Crichton and Douglas Kell and Gutterich and Hallowell and these preeminent iron biologists all agree that we accumulate about 1 milligram of iron every day we're on the planet. And people don't know that. And so they don't know that iron starts to build up in the liver, and it starts to really create an energy crisis in that Rife machine. Rife machine's got to have energy, right? Well, it doesn't work if there's too much iron. And people are just not aware of the intimate relationship between copper and iron, especially as it relates to this iron recycling program, because what's critical is a series of cells. They're called recycling macrophages. Macrophages are the Pac-Man that gobble up all the dying tissue. Can't live without them. And they need to be able to release the iron that they accumulate during the course of their work. And there's an iron doorway. It's called ferroportin iron doorway. And here's the part that's fascinating. The doorman is a copper doorman. If copper's not ready and available to open up that doorway, the iron can't get out, and then it starts to create imbalance, and it starts to lead to misinterpretation of what's happening in iron and copper and other mineral status. And what people don't know is that as iron accumulates in the mitochondria, and it does, there can be a 40% loss of energy, 60%, 80% loss, 96%, depending upon the conditions that are set up in the study. And so no one told us that iron is very disruptive to the mechanics and the machinery of iron recycling. And it's one of the most important things for people to understand, especially women who have a menstrual cycle. Why? Because a lot of women think that if they have heavy menstrual loss, it's called dysfunctional uterine bleeding, DUB, they think they're going to bleed out and die. And that's what they're told. Well, you got to have iron because you've got a heavy menstrual cycle. No. It turns out there's a team of scientists in India, just in 2014, did something no one had ever done. They measured ceruloplasmin status against the thickness of the endometrial wall in the uterus. And the thicker the wall, the more bleeding and the lower the ceruloplasmin is, which means copper is not bioavailable. And it's an earth-shattering study that I think should be central to the conversation on social media, but it's hard to get people excited about something as dry as that.
So you're saying someone with endometriosis probably needs to start supplementing or looking into taking some copper. Is that the connection that you were saying?
I'm not saying it. I'm basing it on 20 articles that I've read.
Right.
It's very clear in the literature what the metabolic problem is in endometriosis. It is not a disease. It is a copper deficiency that causes iron buildup in the tissue. And when ceruloplasmin is low, estrogen rises. Well, what does estrogen like to do? Estrogen and iron like to make things big. And that's why the tissue starts to get thick. It's so simple, but people don't know these dynamics.
So all of this iron that's building up in our bodies, why would anyone be taking an iron supplement on top of that?
because they believe the narrative that they are iron deficient, not knowing the difference between iron in the blood versus iron in the tissue. And it's very important. It's a nuance to iron dynamics that's not taught in doctor school.
You know, copper has been known as an anti-aging mineral as well, and I always laugh because it's known to help with the color of your hair and the pigment of your eyes. So if you're premature aging and premature graying in the hair, that could be a sign of copper deficiency. But I also want to talk about the fact we just have a few more minutes. The brain and the importance of it in the brain, because it is known as brain food, right? The foods that have copper in them. So let's talk about the brain, because so many people are suffering from mental issues, and you touched on schizophrenia, but mood issues and that sort of thing.
No, the thing is, it's all about energy production. And again, when there's conditions, there's low energy production. It's not, again, what people have to do is let go of this idea that there is disease. There is metabolic dysfunction. So when we're under stress, who isn't stressed out on this planet right now, we burn through minerals, which affects our metabolic function, energy drops, and then things begin to demonstrate and manifest through oxidative stress that causes all sorts of symptoms. It's a very simple model. It's called the free radical theory of aging. And when you really want to boil it down, what's behind all aging? Excess iron. And people don't know that. So it's a very central dynamic that more people need to know about it. And it's been well crafted and well hidden. But again, if people are worried about their aging process, if they're worried about their energy process, if they're worried about their metabolic process, it's a very safe bet. They are low in bioavailable copper and they are high in stored iron. And it's well chronicled in the book Cure Your Fatigue.
I highly recommend the book. Can you tell people a bit more about the root cause protocol and what that's involved? I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge, and I love the fact that so much of your information is free because you're so passionate about what you're doing. So can you please tell people where they can find the root cause protocol and follow you and get more information?
Absolutely. So there's on social media, we have a Facebook group called Magnesium Advocacy Group. We have an RCP page. We have a website. It's rcp123.org. What people can do is when they go to that, they can donate their email address, and we'll respect that, but they'll get access to a 50-page document called the Root Cause Protocol and begin to understand the stops and starts, many of which are going to surprise people when they find out that maybe they're doing things they shouldn't be doing because of the narrative that most people are influenced by. And so you get access to that. There's 81 posts on iron toxicity. I've got 200 YouTube videos out there and a lot of information. And then for those that really want to take it up a notch, we have an RCP community. And we have bi-weekly meetings and have webinars and have Q&As and very active group. And then we have a training program twice a year. It's a 16-week program. And we'll be opening up the registration for that in a couple days. And it will start February 9th, and it'll go for 16 weeks. And it goes into a lot of detail that we've been alluding to in this conversation, but it goes much, much deeper. And, we only have so many minutes, but I think people need to understand that there is a lot of research that we've codified in this training and tried to make it interesting and entertaining. But we've also got case studies. We have articles to read, books to read. And so it's a very dynamic process to bring people along this very counterintuitive mechanism that's behind all disease on the planet.
It's just amazing. Our ancestors really didn't suffer from any of the modern day diseases because of the nutrients they were getting in from the soils. And that's a whole nother topic that we are going to get into next time. We've got just a couple minutes left. Morley, is there anything that you want to leave our audience with that we have not covered today?
Real quick, people need to know that glyphosate chelates minerals. We've known that. Turns out that the chelation properties are like a pH scale, like a earthquake. Again, it's a logarithmic scale. And so glyphosate chelates magnesium at a 2. Glyphosate chelates copper at an 11. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? It means that the glyphosate chelates copper 1 billion times stronger and faster than it does magnesium. That's a total game changer that I just learned yesterday. And it's like, it's taking my breath away thinking about it.
Even more, and it just magnifies the fact that everybody needs to be either supplementing with copper or choosing those foods that are so nutrient dense with that copper, like beef liver. I know a lot of people listen to beef liver and they think I'm never going to eat that. There's ways to get it in the body other than actually eating it, but I'm sure there's some good recipes to make it tasty, but it really is important to be supplementing. I am so grateful to you, Morley. I think you are the one, truly a godsend to helping my daughter, because we're talking about that anemia and the lack of energy, and there's nothing worse than seeing your own child have the spirit to want to go do physically and mentally and live life, but just doesn't have that energy. And then we were talking about endometriosis, and she doesn't suffer from that today, but there has been a reading on a biofeedback machine saying that she is on that path. And so I'm, the points are, the dots are connecting, and I am so grateful to you. And you were so gracious to tell me exactly what blood test to get her, which I believe people can find on your website. Is that correct as well?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's called the Full Monty Iron Panel. And it's existing blood work, but I've just put it together in a unique way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Morley. I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you everybody else for joining us today. If I can help you with your health issues, contact me directly through the website, sarabantahealth.com, and I'm happy to put a protocol together for you. You can also find this episode and all my episodes on over 100 channels, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora, or whatever podcast platform you subscribe to. If you like what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button and share with a few of your friends who may need my help. As you share my channel, it helps me help more people like you and bring more cutting edge guests to the show. You can join us every week, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific time and Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time. You can use coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off site-wide. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great week. Thanks, Morley.
You bet.